Hello, I'm Richard Hooper and this is SatTV Week. Now I'm here on the Isle of Man where I'm joined by Tom Maher of DQ. Tom, tell me a little bit more about DQ and its involvement in the space sector.
DQ is one of the largest commercial law firms on the Isle of Man, and we've been involved in the commercial space sector for about 7 or 8 years now. I was the first Isle of Man lawyer to attend the International Space University, I think back in 2003, by default rather than by design, and that got me into this industry. We act for satellite manufacturers, some space tourism companies looking at the Isle of Man, and generally we get involved in the technical legal side of satellite operations and the more general corporate work for these guys.
Now, what advantage does the Isle of Man have over its peers?
It's a good question, and it's a question I'm routinely asked by people both on the Isle of Man who aren't in this industry and people internationally who I meet on space conferences. And interestingly, they usually answer that question themselves when they ask it by saying, surely it's all about the tax, isn't it? And I say no, my answer is completely different. Tax, of course, is one factor in our phenomenal success to date, but it's only one factor. It helps to attract businesses that we have a low tax rate. But if we look at it logically, there are a large number of competitor jurisdictions out there who have lower taxes than us on personal taxation and VAT, who haven't developed a thriving space economy. And we have to look therefore at the other things we've got. And frankly, you've a list as long as your arm about the things that attract people here. A pro-space government, a pro-business government, a government that has a can-do attitude, something you don't see in very many jurisdictions around the world. A thriving private sector with over 30 International Space University graduates here, so high-tech, manufacturing, grant aid for new businesses coming. The list is endless, Richard, but we have developed an expertise in this area and a cluster which is adding value well above the low tax rates that we offer.
The Isle of Man is perceived as a small island community. Now, is this a positive or negative?
I think it's an absolute positive. By being small, we can adapt quickly. We have a government that has an open door policy towards the private sector. We genuinely work seamlessly with the government. And if we see an opportunity, the government listens. And I don't think in the larger economies, the larger jurisdictions, you can adapt that quickly, that you can cut out red tape and bureaucracy the way that we do. So I see it as an absolute positive and a key driver to our success.
Now, the Isle of Man government, is it playing a strong enough role in the development of the space sector?
If I was in many other jurisdictions, I'm sure you would expect me to criticise the government. But frankly, I think they are, and that is my honest answer. What they did back in early 2000s and certainly in 2003, they had the foresight to appoint somebody who knew the industry, somebody who understood the movers and shakers in the industry, somebody who had great contacts, who had industry experience himself. And that was Chris Stott of Mansat. And he was appointed as I think they called it the honorary representative to the space community. We called him the ambassador, Isle of Man ambassador to the space community. A great title, but Chris has been phenomenally successful in driving the Isle of Man space industry forward. And the government had the foresight to realise the civil servants there, with the best of respect to them at that time, they didn't understand the industry. They didn't know how to portray us in that industry. So they got somebody who did. And thanks to that foresight back in 2003, I think the government has presented itself in the best possible light. And it's left a lot of the work to the private sector, but has been fully supportive. And we've got people like Tim Crane now within government who really understands the industry. And he is there representing the government whenever we need him, when we meet private sector businesses.
Now, the Isle of Man's regulatory strength is something people talk about, but how does that work here and in driving these sectors forward?
If you want to set yourself up with a new business or new operations offshore or in an international financial centre, you've got to go to somewhere that's sophisticated and well regulated. And the Isle of Man is certainly both of those. But for well regulated, please don't confuse that with bureaucratic or burdensome. Despite having a sophisticated regulatory regime, we are open for business. We have this can-do attitude, the regulators, the government and the private sector. So it's easy to set up in the Isle of Man, it's easy to do business in the Isle of Man, all with the backing of a well-regulated jurisdiction, but not overly regulated.
Now, how do you see the next 24 months with industries developing on the Isle of Man? What do you see as the key factors in driving it all forward?
I think internationally, the key factor for the future is certainly going to be this private sector space revolution. The public sector is taking a back seat. The public sector historically, of course, have been the innovators, and the private sector have been customers. Times have changed. The shuttle program is over. Most governments are cutting their space expenditure and budgets. So the private sector increasingly are going to be the innovators, and the public sector, of course, are becoming the customers. And we've seen that recently with Elon Musk and what he's done in the States. And as the private sector become the innovators, they need to know they can set up operations internationally in well-regulated jurisdictions with a tax-neutral base, whereby they can spend the profits of their business in R&D, building for the future, creating the latest innovation, the next technology. But to do that in jurisdictions like the Isle of Man, where we have world-class intellectual property laws, low taxes, and governments that want to support the creation of that industry. So I see the next 24 months with private businesses increasingly looking to restructure organisations to be more efficient, looking at places like the Isle of Man for operations in terms of R&D, some low-scale, high-tech manufacturing, and on the financial and structuring side too. So it's an exciting time ahead.
Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.